In this episode of Castoshi, I talked to two founders who are trying to tackle climate change by building the Nasdaq of carbon and ESG assets. They do this by using an economic incentive model for trading carbon credits on the blockchain. The founders have a background in crypto and environmental sustainability, so we have a good conversation about how crypto can enable change in the future of the ESG industry. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to Castoshi, and today we're talking to 6C Index, and we are speaking to Demian and Dan. So, Demian, could you tell us a little bit about your company and what you do?
Sure. Hey, thanks for your time, Zubair. My name is Demian. I'm the co-founder of 6C Index. We are a tokenized carbon asset index that's just coming out of stealth mode. And yeah, I'm really excited to tell you about it. I'm actually going to turn off my video because I'm having video issues, but then we can go on and I can give you a little bit about it. I came up with the idea a little while back with a friend of mine who was a big asset manager in Europe, very traditional kind of establishment economist. And I've been a Bitcoin guy for over 7 years, just as a trader and an analyst and just teaching everyone I could. I had a very profound moment in my life when I saw the voting prototypes on Ethereum, and I saw that this was, the future of the internet and a possible way to democratize a lot of justice issues in life. And so I've kind of been always looking for the right timing and the right project. And I was really inspired by the carbon markets. And I was first inspired actually by Wall Street bets and the idea that you could use internet forums and the new kind of derivative leverage trading to move a lot of capital in a decentralized way, a lot of the way that distributed ledger works. And I thought, well, what if we did something good for the world? We picked something that was altruistic or agrarian. So I started researching, education companies and water stocks, and I came across the new kind of derivatives from the carbon market, and I was completely inspired. And then I spent the last year just becoming like a self-taught carbon analyst and meeting everyone I could and talking to everyone I could and seeing how we could apply blockchain to this industry and do something different. And there was just, there was a lot of things that fell into place with the idea and the people that I met. Dan is one of them. So maybe you can let him introduce himself and then I'll continue the story.
Absolutely. I'm Dan Hutter, another founding member of the 6C Index. And thank you so much for having us on this podcast. A little bit about myself before I jump into my pathway for the 6C Index is I'm a former corporate chief sustainability officer and have been in the ESG space for a considerable period of time, over a decade, and have been involved in blockchain and passionate about it for a good period of time. I consider myself a Ethereum era alumni. And by happenstance, I met Demian, via the decentralized pathways of blockchain. And I was very taken back in a very positive way about his early white paper version of providing a cryptocurrency via an altruistic method to improve the environment with a emphasis on what I would call a significant problem that we face as a planetary society, and that is carbon and climate effects. And what I loved the most was the fact that Demian via the white paper and the other individuals that supported and assisted the early drafts was that we were changing the narrative and really looking at transforming what could be done about carbon as a commodity via economic pathways and that interconnectedness of blockchain and decentralized protocols. So with that, I'll pause there and you can take it away. I'll turn my camera off too for voice concerns.
For some reason, it's already gone off. I've noticed. I don't know why. Maybe that's something at this end, but I can hear you clearly anyway. Okay. So I think that's a good introduction. But what would you, if you had to explain what the company itself does, what is the service it provides? If you had to explain that, how would you do it?
So basically, we're an aggregate and on board for all the different types of carbon assets in the world, and we want to create a clearing price and transform the carbon markets from offsets into units of drawdown. So to kind of understand that, you kind of have to have a little basic understanding of how the carbon markets work. Generally, right now there's two different sectors in the carbon market: volunteer and compliance. And in a sense, it's kind of the same thing. Either you're mandated by the government or you do it by a pledge, but generally you have to figure out what your carbon footprint is based on your personal consumptions or your company. And once you have that, you know how much carbon you're releasing, then you buy these credits that represent carbon that's been removed or allowances to stop carbon. And then you try to maintain a neutrality and you become carbon neutral. The problem with the industry is it doesn't work. It's designed as a transitional cost industry. So what I mean by that is you have to look at carbon as a cost to get to net zero, right? So you say, hey, my company makes this much, and generally it works out to about 1% of that cost has to be put to these carbon assets, and those carbon assets are immediately what's called retired, and it means that they're put towards that specific emission that you've calculated, and it's become a cost, a dead asset. And it's not viable. One, if the world isn't completely mandated, then we're never going to get to net zero anyway, because other countries and people that don't have the pledges won't get there. Also, we have to remove the carbon that was there before. And like I said, account for all the other countries. So we have to change it from a cost to an investment thesis. And that's where blockchain comes in, because we have the ability to buy up all these assets and add to the transparency is one thing. But what we do is we fractionalize them. So we contractually retire them, so they can never be put to one specific emission, so they can't be used as offsets, and they just become units of drawdown. So when you buy them, they just represent reduction or removal of carbon, and your company or your person can afford, instead of doing that 1%, you can easily do 2%, because it's not a dead asset, it's not a cost. It becomes an appreciating asset, an investment. And because of the uniqueness of the financial models in blockchain, there's secondary revenue models, and it opens up a whole possibilities for the future. As the volume and the market sizes grow, then you can create all different types of reserve possibilities, which is needed. So we need a huge change in the way it works. The offsets right now are kind of a necessary evil. They're a license to pollute. And the idea is that you set up emission standards so that you can transition these companies, because the infrastructures aren't built. But we need all kinds of niche products and like ours that change the narrative and eventually completely remove the narrative in the way that we remove it. And then it becomes a kind of a profound possibility, because like I said, in the end, it's all about volume. If we actually get to the point where we're cleaning the carbon and solving the issue, it's such a large amount of volume that it could change the way that we reserve value. And then that has a kind of profound implication on public discourse in the end. So it's an amazing thing. As soon as you start to scrape below the surface and dive into this, you'll realize that the potential is really profound.
Could I ask you something there? So are you saying that the problem with the current system is it encourages people to pollute and just pay the carbon emission? Because I would have thought that with the system you're proposing, it might actually encourage people to pollute more, because then because when they pollute, then they can create the carbon.
No.
Am I misunderstanding it here?
Yeah, well, listen, we are a niche. We are not replacing the system until we have the volumes that have changed the drawdown. So we are
What
just
is the drawdown? What is the drawdown? Can you explain that for me and
okay.
for
Think
viewers?
about it. Okay. So we release 50 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere, right? All these countries and people and companies have made pledges, and all these people are going net zero. Something like 90% of companies in Europe are making effort to buy these credits, but we're still releasing more carbon. The drawdown is when we start going in the opposite direction. When instead of releasing more carbon, we start to clean the atmosphere. And that's the goal, right? So in the meantime, you've got to think of us as not a replacement to the system, but an augmentation to the system. So those companies that use offsets as an excuse to pollute they do it because the emission standards aren't aggressive enough. And we're not against changing the emission standards. We're all for engaging those and making them stronger. But the more that we turn offsets into units of drawdown, those offsets become more scarce and they cost more, and that license to pollute goes up. See, so the model isn't based about instantly replacing the system. It's about enhancing the system, parts of the system that is working, and then creating a niche that eventually takes over. You see?
Okay.
Yeah,
So
Demian,
are you
and I'll
saying
jump
that?
in, and Demian raises some good points here. From the climate side is today we have to do everything we can to nudge the global thermostat in the right direction, right? And that means throwing everything but the kitchen sink, and maybe the kitchen sink, at climate change. And a key method here is to change the economic discussion to give that beyond zero mindset where carbon is seen as a commodity. It's seen as an asset, so that we culturally value it as an asset.
But what's the benefit of? Okay. So what I understand is you're saying that at the moment people are putting all the carbon into the atmosphere and just paying for the carbon offsets. So, but the people who are buying those carbon offsets, are you saying that they should be paying more? Like they should get more and more expensive as time goes on?
Yeah, well, it's simple. It's simple math, right? Because we know how much it costs to remove carbon, right? The average price in the world, there is no set price, and the average price is very, controversial. But it's, you can buy carbon offsets by 1 ton. That's the measurable unit, anywhere from $10 to up to $100, depending. To actually remove the carbon from the atmosphere is $200, and it was $600 just a year ago. But it's just basic market theory. Once the price of carbon becomes profitable instead of subsidized, then you create a boom. And that's exactly what we need for the carbon market to work. The carbon market's not set up there to, be the slow transition or to create all these new jobs. It's supposed to solve an issue, which is clean the atmosphere and avert the climate crisis. And it's a quantifiable number. We know what that costs. 50 billion to get it out. And we know how much it costs it moves. So we have to move that amount of capital. It's just because to move that amount is so significant that it's a shift. It's like 15% of the world's GDP. And to do that, you're creating a completely different mindset of people and the reserve value set in general.
Okay. I mean, so if you're looking back in history at the carbon offset industry, when did carbon first start being like cost money to produce? When did this start? Was it the 90s or the 80s or?
The carbon market's just over 20 years old. It was after the Kyoto Agreement. The countries got together and the government started to really try to implement more policies and aligned with what the scientists said and the kind of to avert global warming. And they started with all different types of what are called schemes, for lack of a better word, where they set up different emission standards and try to start some sort of standardizations, but they haven't even completed them within their own countries or industries. So, but the markets existed, and they're fraught with a lot of issues with greenwashing and double spending, and a lot of these controversies are about to be solved, though, because
could you define greenwashing? Could you define that when you say that?
Yeah, greenwashing is a company that would buy offsets, knowing that they do it to save their reputation and look like they're more green than they are, and they know that in itself is an asset, and the money they use, they put it towards something that pollutes. So you get a net negative of actually helping the planet. That's kind of the definition of greenwashing.
Oh, okay. Is this kind of like so it's like advertising, basically, so so that they can, it's like when maybe an oil company advertises their renewable procedures or whatever, and say,
exactly.
Okay.
But their internal policies don't reflect the kind of advertising that they're saying. And in the end, it's like I said, it gets down to numbers, right? At this point, carbon is a cost. You have to spend, you have to pay for the allowances or the offsets, and you have to equate that as a cost. And then when it goes into the books, it's what do you do with that extra money or less loss of money. In the end, it depends on what industry you're in, whether it's a gain or a loss. But then what you do with it, that's when it becomes really greenwashing. If you have a gain and then you're using it, invest in something else that's also harmful for the environment.
Okay. So sorry to interrupt you, but with another part, so because I'm trying to make sure I understand everything you're telling me. And so after the Kyoto Protocol, then the original aims of it, how would you say in the last 20 years have the original aims, how much of that has been fulfilled? I'm trying to get you to judge the success of it based on what you think.
Well, wow. I mean, most climate activists would tell you it's a complete market failure, but a lot of asset managers wouldn't. And obviously, there are there's successes and there's failures, but overall, the market is a failure because we haven't started the drawdown, but we have started the transition. Especially in Europe, and we have just started valuing the risk. Especially on private public companies and incorporating it, and all of this. It's a difficult kind of calculus to see how the offsets are calculated towards the risk, to the actual move of the transition, and to the price of renewables, to the price of oil. There is no standards in all of this. It's very complicated. That's why you'll hear all the time, oh, it's so much cheaper now with solar and wind, but the actual cost of when you factor in all those dead assets that the fossil fuel companies would have to.
You're breaking up a little bit.
You also have to be free to make a complete switch.
Yeah, so you broke up a little bit, but I could kind of hear what you were saying, and you were saying that near the end when you're breaking up that people say that solar is coming in. Could you maybe repeat that last part, or could you step in, Dan? Because I think your voice was breaking up a little bit at the end.
Dan, maybe you could take the question.
Could you repeat the question, please? Because there was breakup.
Oh, okay.
For the entire system.
Yeah, so I'd been asking about after the Kyoto Protocol how the success was. I heard most of your answer, Demian. So you basically said it was a failure. And
well, I wouldn't call it absolutely a failure. I mean, at the end of the day, the trade in the carbon credits that began with the U.S. Kyoto Protocol, was the first in the international agreement. That's a success right there, to cut CO2 emissions that began 20 years ago. Now, we all realize that we need to accelerate it, but Demian has turned me into, the optimist. versus the fatalists. And, we have done a lot of good things, in, certain industrialized countries to reduce emissions abroad. And that might be cheaper, than at home, such as planting trees in the tropics, preventing deforestation in the Amazon, and that list goes on. And that's been done both through the voluntary and compliance markets. But what we also realized, and we realized specifically, is that climate change isn't decelerating, it's accelerating, as we stated earlier. And it's a considerable and sizable industry that, has grown up around it. And we feel that, we can offer a, new product, as Demian, said very well, on, taking an alternative approach to thinking about carbon as a very important commodity to us versus this expense structure. Demian, are you clear now?
Yeah, it's clear. That goes to our point that is, yeah, I am an optimist, and I think there are things that are working in the carbon market and the move towards sustainability in general. Although in some sense it could still be called a market failure, I don't think we need to throw out the baby with the bathwater, as they say. I think we need just to concentrate on the things that are working and apply new revenue models and technology to those. And there is a lot of hope.
Okay. But okay, so in my head, I'm trying to think now, why is what you're doing something that could work where nothing's really happened in the last... I actually think it's that most... what you said about greenwashing was I thought was an excellent point earlier, because I see a lot of that in everywhere I go. Everyone says we're green, buy this is green, then they push the price of the products up. It's really it's actually just used to push the price up of things by saying they're green. And I even see a lot of the ESG efforts that actually, I personally think they make no difference and actually often harmful to the environment, because they don't look at the big picture and solve the real problems. But why do you think that a blockchain? I mean, I know what my thought is, but I'd like to hear yours. Why do you think a blockchain-based approach can succeed where 100 or 200 nations talking has not really succeeded?
It's not that we're going to succeed where those nations aren't. We're just going to be a tool to amplify the voices of those nations and kind of change the narrative. Blockchain has proven that it can create a $3 trillion market cap without any sort of arduous centralized policy. So if nothing else, it proves that it has the ability to move new capital and change kind of public sentiment and, peripheral thought, if nothing else. There's all kinds of technical aspects to this that only the blockchain can offer, with the fact that the transparency, and the immutability to help solve a lot of the greenwashing issues, to monitor the projects, also to kind of integrate with a lot of geospatial and different kind of monitoring technologies in general to map the carbon projects. And then the revenue side, which has, like I said, the interesting kind of staking models. Once you have we're collateralizing an asset that would normally be a dead asset. And when you do that, then you're creating a new type of value. And blockchain allows for all kinds of interesting new revenue uses and reserve uses for that within the different ecosystems, which is just a very slow and arduous policy if you try to do that through centralized banks or centralized policymakers.
I agree with that. Actually, I mean, I see one of the big things with blockchain is when you try and get agreement in the real world, you might spend 10 years or 20 years, or it might never happen. But with the blockchain, you do it, and it could either take off or it can't. I mean, for something like this, where I see there's a positive is if I have, say, USDC, the US dollar stable coin. If I could just swap that for some of your carbon credit tokens, I mean, for me, if I was as an investor, I would probably just want to see the value of those go up. But then I'm wondering what happens if the value of them overall goes down. Does that mean, does that encourage people to pollute? I'm not sure. There might be 2 or 3 different questions in there, and I haven't worded them well. But maybe you can pull that apart if you can understand what I'm trying to ask.
Does it encourage people to pollute if the price goes down? That's a great question. I mean, that's one for the carbon markets in general. It depends, but like I said, if it depends on the sector and whether you're it's mandated or not. For us as a derivative product, like I said, those credits will never be used to put to specific emissions or offsets. You know, they are, like I said, just collateralized retired credits. So there's no, if the market depreciates, it'll breathe like any other kind of asset over time. But the reality is that we have these massive understanding in society with our governments, with our people. You know, the cat is out of the bag. Everyone wants to save the problem. That wants to save avert the crisis. So the demand is there. You know, the effect on price, you know, I think could only go up in time once we gain traction, because if we're just buying up every carbon asset we can, and it'll only create scarcity and value. So
okay,
our
but
model
it would have
doesn't see downside.
But it would have to force people to innovate. For example, I interviewed Green Hashes a few months ago, and they're trying to make carbon capture like hundreds of times cheaper than it is at the moment. So are you saying that doing what you're doing could force innovators like that to come in and, you know, and try and make, you know, like take more carbon out? Like what incentive have they got if they can take a lot of carbon out of the atmosphere? How can they use this system to actually make money?
If they're taking a lot of carbon out of the atmosphere, it depends on what their revenue model is to scale. Okay, because we're talking about, like I said, 50 trillion a year and growing. Okay, so it's great if you can come up with a technology to take out carbon that's super cheap, right? But if it doesn't scale, how are you going to get the capital to be invested in the first place? You know what I'm saying? It's, if you look at it as a donation and a charity, the governments haven't shown any will to put the amount of money it takes to do it. You know, if you're looking at the private sectors to do it without any sort of incentive, I don't see how that would work. I see that it's based off of the idealist approach is great, and maybe eventually we get there, but time is of the essence. We need to move that amount of capital now. We need to make those projects profitable, because look what they're up against. You know, they're up against. So
yeah,
to me, I don't see it as almost everyone I speak to is united in the idea that we need the price of carbon to go up as a value set, so that that the main companies and like the registries and all of the farmers that are converting to farming carbon instead of cows and all these things, they become profitable, and that, you know, we can engage the capitalist forces that we have. For that other project to work, we'd have to have a seismic shift in to a more idealistic economic system, which we don't have, as far as I can see, because of the size of the problem.
Okay, so if you're like the supreme leader of the world, what would be the right way to solve this problem and to get to, you know, to fix the climate change, in your opinion?
The supreme leader of the world?
Either of you can answer this, because I'm not, you know, or both.
Well, I would, like I said, I would do exactly what we're doing. We would start the regenerative commodity revolution, and we would move major amounts of the world's reserve into regenerative commodities that actually value good over consumption, you know, or obscure debt ratios or scarcity. And that's it. You would start a boom. Like, human investment psychology is very predictable. If you can create something that's you know, profitable and kind of a narrative and myth around it, then it all goes in. So that's it. We need a carbon boom. It's actually going to happen one way or the other. You can see it. You can feel it in the background. And the beauty of this stuff is it's not science fiction. None of this is fantasy. The registries.
You've gone off there. You've
I think you went off the air, but I'm gonna back up where Demian just stated, his remarks. At its core, is this fight against climate change is going to require a massive shift in global consumption habits.
Oh, he's back.
Right,
He's
and that's
back.
not
yeah.
And that's not an easy thing to accomplish. But what we're focused on is blockchain, because blockchain via decentralized layers, it's an incredible tool for incentivizing broad decentralized participation in global green initiatives. And there's going to be multiple players that are going to innovate in our space, in the utility space, whether it's nature-based solutions, whether it's technology solutions, in this fight against climate. But it's an all hands on deck problem. It isn't just, one central figure problem. It's all hands on deck problem.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things though, because at the moment, some places might, like for example, I'm half Indian, so I've heard people say in the West, oh, they know they're doing the polluting, but then when they see people in like India and other places using really polluting cars, they're like, oh, they shouldn't be doing now. Like if you go to India, like people are more concerned about survival than pollution, and if you ask them, oh, what do you say to people who say that you shouldn't be polluting? They say, well, don't I have the right to have cars and things? Even with all this stuff, you've still got 100 times better life. So don't I have the right to even the basic stuff so I can, get to my job? I said that I've made that point because we were talking about, like how, different countries in the world might be polluting and about incentives. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I think you're talking about, multiple, facets of, sustainable development, right? And specifically on the topic consumption habits, wider societal shifts. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear. I mean, but also like, with consumption, like, and one of the things I find very, I mean, correct me if you think this is wrong, but I see so many people are saying to me, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, and then they ignore, like if there's something that affects their actual life, then suddenly, they say that doesn't count in consumer habits. Only stuff which is a nice to have are they, or something they don't really need, they're willing to give up. For example, a lot of people wouldn't be willing to give up meat or driving a car or flying. It's like, no, that's stuff I want to do. I want to go on my holiday. I want to eat meat. I want to. Does that make sense? And so we still do a lot of these things.
Correct.
And that's, I think, about looking at the bigger picture. It's not just about carbon.
There is a bigger picture, but I'll even go bigger. It's that how many people in the world are unbanked, right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And when people are hungry and they have no access to financial resources like services, they don't care what's happening in the environment, because that's not going to kill them. Something else is going to kill them. Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a lot of innovation coming in, blockchains, and some great, blockchains out there that are seeking ESG standards, like for benefit. You mentioned India, like Fire. They're promoting new protocol mechanisms that are really looking at for benefit mechanisms for the broader, uh, for broader societies, that bigger, broader picture. And we are at the cusp of innovation with blockchain meeting ESG, ESG meeting, blockchain, in one sector of, the next industrial revolution, right? We're moving on the, 3 to 4 and soon 4 to 5. And it's going to happen more quickly than it has in the past. And
Yeah.
it's important that, we put in new methodologies, new ways of thinking, and really think outside of the box, which this platform, our proposed protocol and mechanism does.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So with the stuff, so with what you guys are doing, how far are you along now, and what's the kind of the roadmap going forward?
Yes. So, we're finalizing our roadmap. We have just come out of stealth mode, hence we're on this podcast, and we be on others. We have formed strategic partnerships and are in review with other strategic partners as we look forward to, turn our formal roadmap, which is formal to us, move it to an on live chat. We do plan on attending Consensus 2022, which, we are really excited about, and then target, our IDO, later, this year. And, up till that point, it's going to be about, what I would call no different than the carbon market. You want to prevent leakage, right? But I would say we're structurally, forming our team. We are, continually updating, our technical characteristics, our people, and our strategic partnerships, and coming out with pathways to get 6C, out there as we build out our community, our development. So, we're coming out of stealth mode is the short answer, but, we have a lot on deck. And, what I am, most proud of here at 6C is, we have a great group of decentralized individuals that have came from a variety of resources and sectors and countries that are really passionate about this idea of carbon, a new narrative, and really impacting, to do good, which I feel good about.
Okay. And how are you paying for the party so far? Who's funding
Pardon?
this? How are you funding this?
Yeah, so, we will disclose, in time, how it's funded, but we do have funding mechanisms that are in place, and both are, via traditional, I would say, crypto mechanisms, as we seek, initial early investors all the way to IDO launch, all the way to, sustaining liquidity. But,
Okay,
that
so
will
you'll
be
have like
released
a DAO
formally on
or
roadmap.
something. So you'll
Pardon?
have a DAO or something.
Right, right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But, we're early stage.
Yeah.
We're an early stage,
And
seed.
how is it?
And
Because you're based in the US, is that correct? Or in Canada?
yes,
Okay.
in Wyoming.
Okay. And how is it in the US? I mean, I know this is going to be a public podcast, so I don't want to get you guys into any trouble or anything, but are you allowed to start a DAO in the US? Or do you have to get permission before you do it? How does that work?
Well, I'm not going to comment on, the legal aspects
Mm.
of what I would say 6C index is. We will have, another person from our team comment on those, as, Demi and I are focused on, him, being, our lead, and me being the ESG person, that is really looking at the climate and carbon credit market structures. So
Okay, yeah.
we do have pathways.
Okay. It's interesting because like one of the big things I see for a project like yours is I know that so many of the big like index funds and mutual funds and like they want to make ETFs, and I know you can't do it yet in the USA. And it's so hard to get exposure, and ESG, because it's so high up on the list of priorities, I could see that you could act that it could make sense to go to a big pension fund and say, so that you can say, like if you invest in Bitcoin or some other crypto, you could also offset that a bit by investing in us. I see that could be a very good go-to. I don't know, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking that could be a go-to-market strategy. Does that make any sense what I'm saying?
Yes, I mean, I think down the road, we would like to move to, those beachhead states, right? But our initial focus is going to be, on our team, setting up our blockchain, our key strategic partners, and continuing to, push, the narrative,
Okay.
along with our partners.
Okay.
And that's going to evolve with the entire sector of the blockchain itself, which is very early in stage. And the carbon market, as you just discussed, with Demian, it's 1990s. It's not very old either.
Okay. And when do you see this being released? Is this year, next year, like for the general, like where anyone can you say like either go to an exchange or go to MetaMask and buy your tokens? When do you envision that could happen?
Yes, I would say look to the future to get a more solidified date to your specific question. But we will publish a roadmap.
Okay.
And this is coming out of stealth mode. At the start.
I'm always trying to get the dates because I want to I'm trying to figure out work backwards to the roadmap. But okay. Okay. So is there anything else you'd like to say about your company? Because it'd be nice to maybe just talk a little bit about the crypto and the blockchain industry in general, if you're okay with that. Unless there's anything else you want to say about your company first, or about the carbon industry.
Yes, I mean, I would tell your viewers to be open to new mechanisms to really explore the power of blockchain, and most importantly, review the climate market, review climate scenarios, review carbon as an industry sector, and become engaged, because as I mentioned earlier, this is a all hands on approach. We are up against a significant problem, and we all can rise to this challenge and turn it into an opportunity for all, and do our part.
And when you say to encourage people to look at your blockchain, does that mean you're coming out with your own layer one blockchain as opposed to a token on Ethereum or a different blockchain? Does this mean you're making your own layer one?
Well, no, I didn't state that. We were layer one. We will be a layer two. We will not be a layer one. We will be built on top of a blockchain layer one that we are in strategic conversations with some very large blockchains and some very ESG centric blockchains, and we are deciding as a team, a community, which layer one we'll choose. So there's a lot of information, that will be released in the future, based on the legality and which blockchain that hasn't been formally released yet, due to, our agreements that are in place, but it's an exciting future.
Okay, so I assume it's not going to be Bitcoin or Ethereum because they're both proof of work so far. So it'll have to be a proof of stake blockchain at least, I'm guessing. Okay.
Well, as well as I am aware that proof of stake, in terms of a consensus protocol, the energy intensity is significantly less than proof of work, just due to the validation nomination processes. And there are other blockchains that are producing, these hybrid, proof of stake mechanisms that are even going beyond the energy intensity factors and incorporating, other, proof of stake, protocol voting mechanisms that, are ESG layered, right into core. So we are, excited about, those as well, because I know you wanted to talk about blockchain and the innovation that comes. And I think we're at the cusp, as I said earlier, of, blockchain and its interoperability with ESG or vice versa. and you are seeing a significant amount of blockchains become more interested in ESG, which is a good thing.
Okay, so maybe to talk a little bit about the if we could talk a little bit about the future, do you see that, for example, say you go, like at the moment you go to like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, do you see that in 5 years' time we might have a similar exchange, whether it's online or in a physical building in the US, I don't know, or globally, the same sort of thing then for carbon capture and similar um, for similar things, like maybe the Chicago
I hope
Board
there are multiple
of
paths.
of carbon credits or something.
Yes, I mean, there's already, certain, compliance markets on the voluntary side as well that, are indexed with, carbon, whether it's in Europe, and there's already carbon credit trading in the US, right?
Yeah,
But
but it seems
I
to be a
hope,
property of just a sideline or to be ESG compliant is a property of other things, but you're talking about making it a first class citizen. That was my understanding of what you were saying.
yeah, I think, I hope is that blockchains, in terms of, talking about finance, climate futures, is that we're rethinking infrastructure.
Mm,
And, the transition to a low carbon future,
mm,
it requires a significant amount of infrastructure, systems, and services and their interaction, with consumers, and that has to go through a lot of different facets.
mm,
And we won't get into all those facets like procurement, financing, construction, operations,
mm,
etc.
mm,
But where blockchain technologies, and I believe they will come, in my opinion, is that they will be a digital enabler for sustainable infrastructure, and you're going to see new markets.
mm,
Whether it's on the finance side, whether it's on the ops side, and the linkage between on-chain and off-chain.
mm,
On-chain, blockchain, off-chain, outside of blockchain,
mm,
and those mechanisms, whether it's a layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 on blockchain, or a company that wishes to procure carbon credits that is operating and has a consumer product.
mm,
I think all these seeds are being planted,
mm.
and I think more seeds are going to be implanted, and that's a good thing, as this market will grow, and it's absolutely needed, the infrastructure.
Okay. And do you see there's a lot of players in the space who are trying to build this future, or are you one of, like for example, if you look at crypto gaming, there's hundreds of thousands of companies trying to build stuff, but in what you're doing, do you see many companies tackling this?
I think we're very unique in our approach, our narrative, and we hold ourselves, based on the diligence that we've done, is that we're the first to coin regenerative tokenomics. It's that pushing that near narrative, and adding a regenerative fundamental to blockchain technology. And I think we are in this niche space, and I see others coming into it. I see others that are in it, with different protocols, different use cases, different access cases, um, but the visibility and alignment,
Mm,
in terms of overall sustainable goals,
mm,
whether it's on the countryside, the stakeholder side.
mm.
It's at the end of the day, it's about doing good for the planet, and for society. And I think that these enabling platforms, while few today, will be a way in the future to standardize data access, compliance access, and standardization, which
Mm.
will ultimately, in my opinion, be linked to these deep analytics and applications that are housed by the blockchain itself.
Okay. Okay, I mean, I know I was trying to talk about like looking at the future, and also maybe I'll also say, so in 5 or 10 years' time, if your platform is successful, what difference will it have actually made to the world and to how companies behave? like specific things, not just, no carbon? I mean, what
Well,
will they be
yes.
doing differently?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's anyone who can predict the future, you know, that'd be a great thing, right? So I wouldn't say I want to predict the future, but I want to say what I
I
hope
think you should. I think you
for
should
in the
predict the
future.
future, because you're going to change companies' behavior if your
Y-
system works.
Yes, what I'm gonna say is that our goals and our targets, it's to change consumption changes, to change the narrative on carbon as an expense
Mm.
versus an asset, and look at it as more of an asset, to use our platform to bring new innovation into this climate change fight, and to ultimately use blockchain as an enabler that will be this multi-link approach in the decentralized pathways.
Okay. Do you think it's possible that um, when your system is live, it could also cause some companies to pollute more? I know I'd kind of asked this before, but is that possible? Even if it's in the
Pardon?
short term, is it possible that it could incentivize them to pollute more?
I'm not going to call it a possibility, because what we attempt to do is take the good out of the offset market, right, and change that to the drawdown beyond zero approach.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a transition period, right, where we are going to be building out our protocol and using our ESG analytics that Demian talked about, to ultimately build that credibility and trust on chain, and that link to off chain.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm still struggling to find out. So, who's the ultimate set of? I mean, I know you're saying that you want to turn carbon from a like into an asset, and I'm trying to figure out. But who's the people who actually change their behavior? That's what I'm really trying to figure out. Is it the people? Is it investors? Is it funds, or is it the carbon producing companies, or is it all
Can
of
you
them?
guys hear me?
Yeah.
Now I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm back. Um, I'll try to take that question. It's the investors, and then ultimately the sector itself. So it will be the people all of the companies and engineers and the people that are out there trying to remove the carbon and clean the atmosphere. And like I said, ultimately carbon is the start. We're going to reweight the credit. First, it'll be heavy with government and allowances, and eventually it'll just move into pure reduction, and eventually it'll be into biodiversity, and then anti-plastic, and it'll change the kind of the narrative on how you can create value sets, because if nothing else, crypto has proven you can do that off of, speculative protocols. So, and now you can do that off of tokenizing unique digital art. So why don't we tokenize, healing activities? Because we have this new kind of technology that allows us to redefine what the value is, what the reserve is. And so carbon is the low-hanging fruit. And in the end, when you do that, you'll start to change what people hoard in the end. And right now, like, we have the money, right? There's the biggest asset managers in the world, control $100 trillion worth of movable capital. So human society has produced that kind of investment value, and they move it based off of risk assessments. They want to keep it certain size amounts of capital can only go certain places depending on the risk, right? And we want to change how the risk assessment ultimately is of carbon and then other regenerative commodities.
Okay,
And
so
it's kind of a gateway into into how capitalism is used in a sense.
Okay, you mentioned the investors. So does this mean, like, if there's a company, or even just say there's someone sitting at home watching TV saying, the climate crisis, no one's doing anything about it. Are you if they then took their laptop, they took their MetaMask, went to your website, bought some of the tokens, that would push the price up a bit. Would that make it more expensive for polluters?
Exactly. But in the end, like I said, we are an institutional product. We're going to use the retail market to get the attention of the blockchain and the crypto owners in that world, and then the fringe funds that already have some of their portfolio in crypto. And then as the market matures in general, where they iron out the custodial issues, and we iron out the ESG issue, the two big barriers for institutional money. So in the end, we're an institutional product because, like I said, it's quantitative. We need to get, it's a $9 trillion value that we need to get out of the sky. And so we need a whole sector, a whole new asset class to begin. So obviously it won't just be us, we'll be the Nasdaq of that. And, it's growing in the peripheral. Like you said, there's thousands of gaming or NFT companies in the last few years. A year ago, there was maybe one tokenized carbon. Now there's at least 50, right? So people just it hasn't caught on, or people haven't understood it, but that's the way, technology works. And the regen market, the regenerative finance, it exists. It's actually, like I said, once you dig into it, I think it has the most profound implications, and it kind of pushes a discourse in a way a lot of people can relate to. We're just at the forefront of that. In the end, like I said, it's about moving big institutional monies. The average person and all these things, we want to affect them, the narrative in the end, but we want to affect the market itself so that we start a boom in all of the technologies that convert it. And like you said, those licenses to pollute, the offsets shoot up,
Yeah,
in the end,
I think in some ways this is like the gaming for normal people sitting at home. Like, they might invest in gaming tokens, which they do, and companies, this will be their equivalent of a gaming token. We want to do good. Let's invest in this carbon token, carbon offset token. Yeah,
exactly. And like I said, are we going to solve the issue? Are we going to remove the 50 billion tons? Well, we know how much that costs. And how are we going to do it? Is it going to be an expense on society? And who's going to pay for it? Insurance companies, donations? That's not going to work. It isn't working. So we need to turn that into a commodity, into a value set. And then, that can become, once it gets big enough, it becomes the value set under, just like Bitcoin. Once it got big enough, it started to become an underlying for all kinds of different industries. And then, the sky's the limit. But it's pure numbers. We just have to get it to the 7 trillion a year, which is enormous, and it's a big undertaking. But I totally see it happening in the next 5 years.
Okay. I was going to also ask, but maybe it's getting a bit too technical. I was going to ask about how you link the digital assets to the actual, because I'm assuming there's a contract in the real world, but
it's actually not that complicated in far as smart contracts go, because we're not incorporating a lot of utilities. There are other tokenized carbon assets out there, and they're going one-to-one with the credits, and so that people can hold them or retire them and use them as offsets. Like I said, we're pulling them out of the offset ecosystems, and we're just putting multiple registries. Each carbon credit produced by a registry or government has its own registry code. So we're taking the registry code and then just adding that to adding multiple registry codes to one single token, basically, so that you don't control any of them, but you own a small percentage of all of them. It's actually quite simple theory in a sense, because like I said, we're taking away utility. So it's not that complex. The complex side is like that comes with when you balancing any stable coin or commodity token or any ETF with an underlying in general. And that's where you need a balancing mechanism to protect the analog values opposed to the value set your own API. We have if you read in our white papers, you can see that which kind of algorithmic solution we're using. It's basically, we have a secondary utility coin, which we hold a value. And if it goes below, if the actual underlying moves out of sync with the index token, then we buy or burn them to keep it in the value. It's the same system they use for ETFs in general.
Yeah. Just don't mention UST because that tanked today and yesterday. Like Luna. Yeah. Okay. I think Dan's dropped off, by the way. Is it so? Maybe we should close off soon. But is there anything you'd like to add, like where people can find you and
like you can look for us and come to our website, and then from there you can find us on Twitter and Telegram and Discourse. We're coming out of stealth mode. We're going to make some big announcements soon, and we're going to have a real community, because we've been fielding offers and deciding on which blockchain and which strategic partners we're going to take. We have partners lined up on the procurement side and on the investment side, definitely on the blockchain side. And so there's going to be a lot happening soon, and people will hopefully be able to find us really easily.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Okay, so thanks a lot for your time, Demian, and say bye to Dan for me. I know he's dropped off at the moment.
Hey, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Zubair, and I'm glad I worked out my technical issues here in the end. And I look forward to rocking your world in the future with our products.
Super. Thanks a lot, Demian. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Bye.